Uh, Thank you for inviting me to this conference. Actually, originally I proposed the title which Dr. Kim just mentioned, but I changed a little bit my title because while I'm studying this project, then I found the whole topic actually focused on the canon and canonicity. And another thing that I found is I think it's enough to deal with the ancient Chinese Confucian process of canonization rather than broadening up to the point of a Korean Confucian process of canonization. So right here in this project, I try to focus on Qumranic canonicity and the ancient Chinese Confucian process of canonization. So I changed my title a little bit, first of all. Here for the presentation, first part, I try to use the PowerPoint slides, and then I move on to my paper to show more detail my presentation. Okay. Okay, first thing I have to say, I try to approach the whole topic, whole project from the etymological approach. So first of all, I try to dig up how we get the word canon in whole world, actually. So I found the sutra in original Sanskrit is maybe the oldest word for denoting the canon. So sutra in Sanskrit literally means threading and weaving to make a garland of flowers on the head. And then found the Korean, Chinese, and Japanese, we all use the same Chinese character to refer to canonical scriptures. That is Kyung in Korean pronunciation, and Chinese pronounced Jing. I don't know Japanese, but anyway, the Far Eastern Asian countries, we all use the same word, this first word right here. Okay, so this word, we use the same Chinese character. But the problem is, we have two Chinese words, it has actually the same sound, the Gyeongjeon and Gyeongjeon in Jindian in Chinese. But actually the Chinese characters are different. So you can see the two different words right here in the second part. So the first part, this one, Jeon, actually shows the bamboo pole. This is a hieroglyphic expression. And the second word, this one, signifies somebody who's working in the loom, the splinter. So he's working between two poles. So etymologically, the first part, Gyeongjeon, this one, Jingdian, this one refers to more like the material, physical bamboo poles. And the second one, this one is working on the threading and the weaving on the splinter. So in Sanskrit Sutra and Chinese characters, both refer to weaving and threading. So it's kind of making something, making products. But in contrast, in the English side, we find the canon. Canon originally derives from the Greek word canon, as Dr. Kim, he already mentioned. Canon is originally literally refers to read, standard, criterion. And in English side, we have canon and Bible and scripture. So these three words more like exchangeable synonyms to the general audience. But the scholarly guild, we try to distinguish between these words. So the canon seems more like a fixed, final, and closed list of books. And Bible, the big B, is the book for Christians. And the scripture in English usage, we put this the scripture to every religious text, such as Buddhist scriptures and the Confucian scriptures and the Christian scriptures. So in general society, we use these three words exchangeably, but the scholarly guilds, we try to distinguish these words. But as we know, the canon, even though we say this is a fixed list of books, but according to different church, we have a different numbers of books for the canon. So according to Catholic Bible, we have 73 books, and the Greek Orthodox Bible, they have 79 books, and Ethiopian Orthodox Bible, they have 86, and the Protestant, we have 66. So even though we say canon is a fixed and closed list of books, but according to the church, we have a different sets of the numbers of Bibles. So then we have a question, the canon, even though we say this is a fixed list of books, but different church use different numbers of books. So Latin canon is not fixed. So the word, the definition itself has the inherent problems. So that's what I try to dig here in this paper. And James Sanders, I got a very good insight from his definition. He tries to focus on canon as a function rather than as a shape. So canon, we have to move on to the canon's function in the congregation. So here in my paper, I try to say canon has two functions. So number one, canon functions for exclusivity, because canon plays a role of identity marker. So for instance, Protestants, we use 66 books only. So then this can be an identity marker to differentiate from other church members. So from Catholics, they have different numbers and we have different numbers. So the canon sets an identity marker for exclusive membership. But in other way, canon plays an inclusive role. So the canons tries to unify, to make a unity of the congregation members. So if we say, okay, I believe only 66 books are canonical books, then the whole congregation members of that Protestant churches, we can be unified within that belief in 66 books. Okay, so the canon can be canon functions in two ways, the exclusivity and inclusivity. So here in this paper, I try to show canon is not a fixed. It shows a double ways of applying in the congregation in general society. Okay, and another thing that I want to distinguish here in my project is the canon and canonicity. The canon and canonicity is definitely related word in English usage, but canon and canonicity is very different in our general notion, because canon signals a fixed, but canonicity, it's a varying in accordance with the community of religious faith. So the Qumran community and their scholars are very good test case for understanding canon and canonicity, because the majority scholars, we believe, Qumran scholars show a process of canonization in Judaism and Christianity. So everybody agreed that we should look at the Qumran scholars to understand the canon and canonization, canonicity for Judaism and Christianity. So I try to deal with the Qumran scholars. And here in my project, I try to focus on Qumran sectarian scrolls, because in the Qumran scrolls, we have two categories. Number one is the biblical scrolls, and another one, the second one is the non-biblical scrolls. So we say this is the sectarian scrolls. So I try to focus on looking at the sectarian scrolls in my project. And by looking at the sectarian scrolls, I found three things should be highlighted to understand their understanding of canonicity. So number one is the teacher of righteousness. His existence is really important for this Qumran community, because the Qumran community, they believe a teacher of righteousness, he gives the whole interpretation, the only and true interpretation for the Bible. So if you follow the interpretation of a teacher of righteousness, then you are in. Otherwise, you are out, and you are just the way outside of this Qumran community. So the teacher of righteousness and his interpretation is the criteria for understanding the Qumran canon. So here in my project, I try to say Qumran community, they had already had the notion of a canon and canonicity. This is a little bit different from the majority scholars claim Qumran communities are still on the way to canonization. But here in my paper, I try to say Qumran community, they have a very rigid and strict idea of a canon and canonicity, even though they didn't use the word canon and scripture, but they already had the idea what is the canon in terms of exclusivity and inclusivity. Because by having that notion, the idea of a canon, who is in and what book is in or out. So the first standard of that the Qumran community's canon and canonicity provided by the teacher of righteousness and his interpretation. And secondly, we have to look at the Pusharim. Pesher in Hebrew is pursue, seek, after. So here in the Qumran scrolls, we have a very unique genre, that is Pusharim. So we have, for example, we have a 1Q Pesher Habakkuk. So this is more like a commentary to the book of Habakkuk, the Bible, okay? So we have the Pusharim as a distinctive separate genre. And then we have a very unique genre of the Qumran scrolls, rewritten scrolls. So by highlighting these three the features of Qumran scrolls, I try to say the Qumran community, they had already the idea of what the canon is, what the canonicity is. So I try to show the teacher of righteousness is like the only and the single person who can teach in that community, and it provides the interpretation. So for example, 1Q Pesher Micah, this is like the commentary of the Micah, book of Micah. So right here in the fragments 8 to 10, lines 6 to 9, this refers to the teacher of righteousness who himself shall teach the law to his party and to all those who are willing to be added to the chosen of God, those that keep the law in the party of the Yahad, who will be saved on the day of judgment. So here in Pesher Micah, the Qumran community, they try to first quote the biblical verse from the book of Micah, then they try to provide the teacher of righteousness interpretation. So in that way, they try to, what is the canonical interpretation for the book of Micah? So in this example, we can see the Qumran community, they had already the notion of a canon and canonical interpretation. And the Pesher Micah, for example, is more like the canonical scripture. So it's not the equal to the book of Micah, but it's more like a good detailed interpretation and explanation of the book of Micah. And another example, we can find the Pesher Habakkuk. So here, line 12, Pesher Habakkuk quotes the biblical verse from Habakkuk chapter 1, verse 4. So true judgment never comes forth, for the wicked man comes in the righteous man. So the verse 12, line 12 actually tries to quote directly from the book of Habakkuk. Then they put the interpretation, line 13, like this: the wicked man refers to the wicked priest, and the righteous man is the teacher of righteousness. So right here in this line 13, we can find a very sharp distinction between the outsider's interpretation and insider's interpretation. So by looking at this kind of the Pesher verses, we can find the Qumran community, they had the notion of the idea of canon and canonicity. I think time is running out. So in the second part, I try to show the Confucian process of canonization. So for a long period of Chinese history, the Confucian canons are expanded and added and reduced. So sometimes it's reduced, sometimes expanded, then it put the interpretation, reinterpretation for a long time period. And the one thing that I have to say, during the time of a Qin dynasty in Korean, Qin dynasty. So during this time, we have 100 schools of thought and the contention of 100 schools of thought. So that means during this time, the Confucian scholars, they had a hard time under the time of Qing dynasty. But as times go by, Confucians, they just established and canonized, and the Confucian canons just make a big, archives. Okay, so the Confucian process of canonization shows the canonization process includes the ideological struggles and the political struggles. Then they finally crystallized their canons. So this Qumran community and the Confucian process of canonization both shows the flexibility to add up their interpretation, reinterpretation to the original scriptures. So it's more like open-ended, but they had the canonicity. What is the script, the authoritative scriptures? So I think this is my presentation. I think I better stop here. And if you want to see the whole manuscript, then I will upload. Okay, thank you for listening.